I thought, actually, as you'll all have seen the programmes that I've made recently, there's no point, and someone's nodding, that's good. There's no point in showing you a clip. So I don't have anything to show you because I can't compete with Pete's photographs. I can't compete vocally with the singing we've just heard. But I think just watching everything that I've seen today and everything we've just seen tonight, it's about how wildlife and the natural world inspires people. And that's what it is. It's kind of always done that. If we look back to the kind of sort of tens of thousands of years ago, when human beings kind of that looked like us, kind of sounded like us, had the same kind of dreams and aspirations as us, when they were living in caves, living in Northern Europe, the things that they sort of first, I suppose, documented sort of history before people were writing, before people were telling, sort of writing down stories, they were painting on the walls of caves, they were carving on rocks, and they didn't carve pictures of themselves, they carved pictures of animals, of wildlife. And it just sort of shows, I think, kind of sort of how our relationship has changed with the environment, with nature. And as we sit in this building, we're kind of clad in concrete and metal, we're double glazed. If we were all completely silent, you wouldn't hear one of the swans that's out on the Clyde. You might catch a glimpse of a bird that's, flying overhead. So we have completely sort of insulated ourselves and isolated ourselves from the natural world, to the extent that we don't ever think of ourselves as being part of it. And those people that drew a muskox or a cave bear or a saber-toothed cat, species that are long extinct, species that we played a big part in probably getting rid of, they had a fundamental respect for those animals. That's why they documented, that's why they left them behind for us to see. And I think, I've kind of I've been doing this job since I was 17, so 10 years on, it's been, no, I've been doing this job for 25 years, and I started off as an assistant, and I grew up on the Isle of Mull, so I did have a kind of relationship. I spent a lot of time outside, so I was kind of used to getting wet and sort of, being out on the shores and out on the hills and seeing kind of wild animals. But I never thought this is how I want to spend my career. I definitely knew that I didn't want to, as lovely as this building is, I knew that I didn't want to sort of sit behind a desk and just try and avoid getting a proper job. That's something that's a normal job, and just sort of more by just being in the right place at the right time. I got a job as an assistant, and yeah, I'm kind of still working in this sort of television or wildlife, natural history industry, and to try and kind of give you a sense of the things that I've learned over the years would be impossible, because most of them I've forgotten. But there are some things that I kind of that I've learned that I kind of hang on to, and I sort of fixate on those things. So tonight I kind of want to talk about this a big change that sort of had happened in me, or maybe a small change for everyone else, but it is a kind of change in your beliefs, the sort of rules that you have, as Pete was talking about, those moral guidelines and ethics, which kind of, when you're talking about wildlife, that's a big part of it, and it's sort of the respect that you have for those animals. You have to have a kind of set of rules. And one of my strongly held beliefs was that you should never, ever, ever give a wild animal a stupid human name. And if anyone's watched the recent programmes that I've made, every animal has a stupid human name. And it's something that I had to kind of, when I first started, actually, the first time I kind of had to start to reconcile myself with this idea of naming a wild animal, was working with Nigel on Big Cat Diary, because I suppose at the heart of that series was identifying individuals, was actually not looking at the natural history of a pride of lions or of a leopard. It was about actually looking at that leopard, looking at those lions. And I think way back to when I first started working in 1990, and I found myself in the middle of the Gola rainforest, living on an island in the middle of a river for a year and a half, and it was a truly incredible place. It was believed to be the world's densest population of primates living on this island. There was 11 different species, 12 if you included me and my boss. But the holy grail, the one primate that I really wanted to see, were the chimpanzees that we were told that lived there. And we spent a month and we saw colobus monkeys, black and white colobus, red colobus monkeys, mangabees coming through camp. It was kind of like shooting fish in a barrel. I thought that was the first rainforest I'd ever been to, and I thought all rainforests were like that. And rainforests are bloody difficult places to work. It's very, despite the fact that they're the most ecologically diverse or biodiverse places on the planet, it's actually really difficult to see a lot of the stuff that lives there, because a lot of it, I mean, certainly mammals, it takes place up in the trees. But the chimpanzees, I'd wanted to see a chimpanzee. I'd never even seen one in a zoo at that point. And one day I was walking through the forest, and I had that sort of feeling. It does sound a cliche that you feel that you're being watched, or there's a pair of eyes on you, but I did have that feeling. And I kind of looked up, and there was a shadow just about 15 meters off to my left. And that shadow started to move, and that shadow became a shape, and that shape became this bloody enormous chimpanzee, like a big male. And he kind of just walked onto the path. He was over there. He just looked at me, and he was saying to me, I could hear it in my head, he was saying, "This is my forest. What are you doing wandering through my forest?" And I just kind of started to shrink, thinking, yeah, I know this is your forest. I'm just kind of passing through. I'm just, and it remains one of the most spectacular things I've ever seen, to be confronted by, I suppose one of the most incredible animals on the planet, one of the animals that are so similar to us. And the relationship with that individual continued through that year. It wasn't my last encounter with them. There was one morning, about a month later, I was lying in my hammock, and I just saw this familiar-looking face looking out of the trees. And I thought, what the hell is he doing in my camp? And he knew exactly what he was doing. He was after my bananas. And I was like, he walked quite carefully but confidently across the clearing towards our kitchen. And in the kitchen, there was a big bunch of bananas. And he was looking over at me, but I was kind of doing that thing that you do with kids when you're pretending you're sleeping, but you're not. You're just looking at them. And he was kind of just watching me. And he walked into the kitchen, and he saw the bananas were on a hook, and he kind of just reached up and was like, nah, he's still asleep. And he unhooked the bananas, put them under his arm, and off into the forest. And I was said to my boss, I said, that chimpanzee, the chimpanzee that I met in the forest, he was back. Never did I say Brutus or that, but if I was going to give a chimpanzee another name, it would be Pan-troglodytes, which is a Latin name. I wasn't ever going to, it was just that chimpanzee. A month later, I was sitting in my camp again, and he appears, and our mango tree had just started to come into fruit, and we were really excited because we were just sort of like another few weeks, and there'll be mangoes to eat. And this big chimpanzee walked straight in. He knew exactly what he was after. He was after my mangoes. And he walked across the camp, climbed into the tree, and he was looking at it. And you could see that I wasn't asleep, but he thought, I've met you before. You know that this is kind of my forest. These are my mangoes, so I might leave some for you. And the greedy shit just kind of like crooked his arm, and he just sort of started picking them, and he kept on looking over at me. He says, "I'm taking your mangoes." And he just sort of like was squeezing them, grappling just tested, just like he wasn't going to leave a sort of decent ripe mango for me, and he just loaded up his arm. And then he kind of thought, right, okay, and a couple of them fell out of his arm, and he thought, right, okay, I'm kind of stuck here. But he kind of squeezed one last mango, and he thought, oh yeah, this is a good one. And he was like, shit, I'm not going to be able to climb out of the tree with this lot and this one. So he went and stuck it in his mouth and used his free arm to climb down. And he disappeared behind a tiny little bush. And it barely concealed him. And every 2 minutes, he stuck his head up with his mouth just dripping with mango juice. And at no point did we ever think, right, okay, let's give this chimpanzee a name, because we felt it was wrong. It was just it was almost sort of like a lack of respect to give a wild animal a name. So if we jump forward to a decade or so later, and I was here in Glasgow, and I was asked to film urban foxes, for Springwatch. And I went out and met one of our neighbours, actually, that said that she had a fox that came into her garden. And when I met her, she said, oh, it's Jamie the fox. And I was like, you gave him that? I had nothing to do with giving him this name. And every single night, this fox, Jamie, came to her house, and he got half a dozen eggs, organic eggs, and she gave him a couple of chicken fillets every night. And then on a Sunday, Jamie got lamb. And her husband said, I don't even get lamb on a Sunday. And And she said, there's lots of foxes around here, lots of big male foxes. It's interesting how they all got along. Because the McNichols up the road, they've got Bobby the fox that goes to them, and then the sort of the Jordans up the road, they've got Casper, their fox, and we all feed them. Never once did she follow Jamie up the road until someone shouts, "Bobby, Bobby!" and Jamie becomes Bobby, and he shows up and gets his sausage rolls from the Jordans, and then he walks up the road. And I realised then, Jamie didn't give a shit what he was called. He would be anyone to anyone to anyone. And it's sort of, I thought, we are human beings. We are inescapably human. There are things that we do that just simplify things. You kind of pinpoint, the way that we use our language. It just sort of we try and eliminate misunderstanding, and we give things names. It's a natural part. That's why we all have names. That's why we agonize over what we're going to call our children, because we have to we think we have to call them something. Maybe we don't. But so why shouldn't we give wild animals a name? Because they simply don't care. And there's other sort of, I suppose, what else is kind of inescapably human is that there's always this danger of anthropomorphizing a wild animal. And I think maybe my fear was that if you give a wild animal a human name, you're personifying it. But personifying an animal doesn't turn it into a person. It just helps you better understand that particular animal. And with personifying an animal, its personality emerges. And that is the thing, that kind of something that has really kind of astounded me over the years, is that every single living thing, we kind of sort of quite arrogant, and we think that we're the most unique creatures in the world. But the fact is that sort of we're all sitting here, we all sort of hopefully laugh at the same things. We all kind of are moved in a very similar way. But we are all very different. And wild animals are very, very different. Even if you go down to something like you look at the trees out sort of by the Clyde, if you look at one of them, no two trees is the same. The way that the world has interacted with them, the way that the sun has shone on that particular tree is different to how it's shone on this other tree that's right next to it. They're the same species, but they've had different life experiences. And I think through the programs that I've sort of been involved in, I think it's sort of about actually, not talking about those creatures, not talking about those wolves, not talking about those bears, but talking about that bear. So that bear or that wolf becomes the ambassador for their species. And we care about individuals. I hate to quote Stalin, but Stalin says that sort of, if one person dies, it's a tragedy. If 1 million people die, it's a statistic. So it's about, I think there's a lot that helps us understand the other creatures that we live on the planet with by looking at that individual. And I think it is, we care a lot more about those creatures if we give them a personality, if we kind of actually sort of look at that animal and say, well, why is this particular animal different to the one that lives alongside it? And with, I suppose, personality, with some animals comes proximity. And this is another kind of boundary that I've had to sort of change for myself, because I always wanted to just think, well, I want to film wild animals, and thou shall never be seen. That there should never be an interaction between you and a wild animal. That was really crossing the line. So I've never wanted to kind of, I've wanted to swim with dolphins, but I've never wanted to reach out and touch one. I've been close enough to sort of some creatures that you could just reach out and touch, and I think that is crossing the line. But you cannot view a wolf as being kind of, you cannot generalize. If I look back, we spent weeks and weeks in the Cascade Mountains in Washington looking for wolves. And there was a big group of us. We spent every single day, all day, searching for wolves. And the wolves in that part of North America did not want to be seen. I'm sure we were seen on countless occasions, but only one small team, I think 3 of our team, actually were lucky enough to see two wolves. So jump forward to 2014 when I went up to the Arctic to film wolves. Wolves weren't ever my favourite animal. And I arrived in the Arctic thinking, well, the last time I tried with wolves, it wasn't that successful. They're a difficult creature. You know, they've learned a very valuable lesson from human beings, which is we should be feared. So we arrived in the Arctic. We got a chopper out into the field, pretty much kind of unceremoniously dumped onto the tundra. We had this big pile of kit. The helicopter took off, lots of noise kind of shattering the peace of the Arctic. 2 minutes later, I was bent over and I looked round, and literally kind of sort of 10 meters away was this huge Arctic wolf just walking straight towards us as if we didn't exist. And I was like, fuck me, this is going to be easy. And it was an incredible moment. And I kind of suddenly sort of, over that period of time that I spent in the Arctic, I realized that actually you can let the animal have that decision. You can let the animal dictate where that boundary is. It shouldn't be, I'm not going to go within 100 meters of a wolf, because some wolves will actually kind of, you know, you don't have a choice in it. They'll walk right up to you. Last year when we were filming the gorillas, we had the 7-meter rule that you weren't allowed to get any closer to this family of gorillas than 7 meters. And we had the luxury in that, I suppose, the trackers that were working with those gorillas had taught that group a valuable lesson, is that they actually didn't need to fear us, that we could have this kind of relationship. And it's actually a real relationship that exists, sort of, that's based on trust, that we trusted those gorillas that they weren't going to hurt us, and they trusted us that we weren't going to hurt them. They didn't care about the 7-meter rule. We did. And every time sort of we were, okay, 7 meters, that's fine, we're happy here. But then you got these sort of personalities, these individuals that were different to the rest. And like, oh, I want to get closer. And it's quite difficult to stick by the rules when the animal you're filming doesn't know the rules. And I'm like, 7 meters, sorry, the 7 meter, I have to go, there's a burn there. And you think, well, I actually don't want to fall foul of the kind of the authorities. So we had this farcical situation of trying to always keep 7 meters from the gorillas, and it's not always possible. But I think kind of really to sort of round off this sort of idea is that I think through that proximity to a wild animal, we care more about it. I suppose proximity for a wildlife filmmaker, that's sort of, that's the key. You can have a big, huge lens, but the closer that animal is to you, the more you can actually reveal of it, the more you can reveal of its life. And I think as long as at the very heart of what you do has the respect of the natural world and the respect of that animal, that sort of, you can give that authority to the animal, let them decide sort of where it is comfortable, where the sort of comfort level is with it, and just really truly view that creature as the individual that it is. And what I want to do, I think more than anything else, it's sort of, I know Pete, and it's really interesting to hear you say what you have to say about your relationship with the natural world, because what I strive to do is try and make people or help people care more about the natural world. And I think we'll all agree that that's what the natural world needs. It needs more of us to care about it. And it would be great to think that, maybe 25 years from now, there'll be somebody that goes back to Sierra Leone that's walking through that forest and meets a descendant of that big chimpanzee that I met. I think, Jesus, you're a brute. I'm going to call you Brute. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.